And we need to conform to the statue and what it desires of us, its vision, its values, its will. And we feel that same pressure today, that there are statues in our world imposing forces, political forces that also have a certain will and agenda and plan for our lives. They impose these ideas on us, and they require allegiance. They want our foremost allegiance. And there are consequences if you don't conform. And as we look at history, we see this idea of the state or the nation or some political power having preeminence is not new. It's not a new thing. It's something that has played out throughout history. It has always been something that has guided societies over the years. And I want to look in particular at a period of time in the Old Testament where there was one king named King Nebuchadnezzar, who basically was the ruler. He was the ruler, the monarch over Babylon. And at the time, this was a man who was the most powerful man on the planet. He was leading and guiding a superpower, an ancient superpower. He had unmatched authority. He also carried great religious authority as well. Babylonian kings claimed they were appointed by the gods to rule, that they were representatives. In this case, Nebuchadnezzar was representative of the god Marduk, and the king was the guardian of his religion. And you absolutely did not want to offend him. You did not want to upset him. It would not work out very well if you didn't embrace his religious aspirations and ideas. And then one day, King Nebuchadnezzar faced a problem he could not solve. Despite his own personal brilliance, he was a very brilliant military strategist, very brilliant thinker, brilliant leader. He had a lot of people around him, advisors that were called astrologers at the time. And he had this problem. See, one day he had a dream. And in this dream, things happened, and he wanted somebody to interpret the dream for him. And so his advisors around him said, "We'll interpret the dream, king, as long as you tell us what the dream is." But Nebuchadnezzar wasn't stupid. He's like, "Listen, I'll tell you what I dreamed, and then you'll make something up. I won't even know if it's true. So here's the deal. You need to tell me the dream, and then I'll believe your interpretation." Well, they didn't like that. They didn't like that at all. They were very upset, and they should have been, because Nebuchadnezzar was not a nice man. He was a despot. He was a killer, absolute killer. If you offended him, if you upset him, your lifespan would be very, very short. And so he got mad, and he was going to kill a bunch of people. All his advisors, all these astrologers, he's going to kill them all because no one can tell him his dream, and he can't trust their interpretation. There was, however, a young man named Daniel who had been deported, exiled from Israel to Babylon as a young Jewish guy, and he found himself in this regime. He was considered a wise person. He was a counselor, and he was a guy who heard that the king was on the rampage and was going to kill a bunch of people. So Daniel prayed about this and learned that God would not only tell him what Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, but interpret it as well. And so he sent news to the king saying, "Don't kill everybody. I'll tell you the dream. I'll tell you what happened." And if you want to read this story, it's in Daniel 1 and 2, chapter 1 and 2. Super fascinating story. But I want to pick it up in chapter 2, verse 31. And it says, "You looked, O king, and there before you stood a large statue." So he's telling the king what his dream is. There's this large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were broken to pieces at the same time, and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Here Daniel speaks of a statue, and later we learn that the statue represents human power centers. It represents human kingdoms, the kingdoms of this world. And the king of Babylon is the head of pure gold. He's the greatest of all, even of all the subsequent kingdoms to come. He is by far, he exceeds them all. And he is the one who hears about this amazing statue. He dreams of this statue. And the statue is imposing. This statue is powerful. It stands out in the landscape of all other things. It's the only thing you can see. Its presence is towering in every way, and it represented the dominance and the extent of human achievement. It was also made of precious metals. In other words, it was valuable. It had great value. It speaks of Nebuchadnezzar and these other kingdoms and how they use conquests and trade to accumulate great wealth. They brought great prosperity to people. Their commerce was unmatched. Babylon was an incredibly powerful and rich nation. It also speaks here of, as a monument, this imposing statue. It's a monument to human pride and ingenuity. It's a monument to human self-glorification, how it lifts itself up above all other things. And in verse 31, we get a description of it. And it says this, that it was an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome, absolutely awesome in appearance. It assumes godlike status. It conveys godlike presence. This is a picture, again, of the kingdom of this world, how nations, how political entities and powers seek out totalizing power. They're all encompassing. They dominate in the world. They seek that position among people. And we need to conform to the statue and what it desires of us, its vision, its values, its will. And we feel that same pressure today, that there are statues in our world, imposing forces, political forces that also have a certain will and agenda and plan for our lives. They impose these ideas on us, and they require allegiance. They want our foremost allegiance. And there are consequences if you don't conform. But in this dream, there's not just a statue. There's also a rock. And this rock is very different. It says this rock was cut out, but not by human hands. The rock was cut out by God himself, by his hands. And it represents not the kingdoms of this world, but the kingdom of God, his reign and rule over the world, his plan for the future and all the things he desires and will bring about: justice, peace, fulfillment, satisfaction, ultimate prosperity are all things God has in mind as he creates a new heaven and an earth where righteousness dwells. And this rock just doesn't come off as the main focus. It feels inconsequential. It feels very small. It doesn't really get much attention. It doesn't seem very powerful, but appearances are deceiving. Turns out the rock is far more powerful than the statue. It is something that strikes the statue. The statue collapses, it crumbles. The greatness of this statue is reduced to dust. The wind blows and then it is no more. But the rock, in contrast, it starts small. Its beginnings are humble. It's not even big enough to just kind of completely overwhelm the statue. It has to strike its feet. It's small, but it grows. It expands, and eventually it fills the entire earth. The rock's humble and easily overlooked origin can no longer be ignored. And here is the thing: it eventually replaces the statue. It takes over. It becomes a mountain that fills the earth. And here the contrast is huge between a kingdom of this world and the kingdom of God, between a kingdom that crumbles and a kingdom that prevails, between a kingdom that has a moment of glory and then fades, and a kingdom that has eternal glory that never fades. There's the statue, and then there's also the rock. And I think what we see here is that there's really only one all-powerful ruler and king, and only one enduring kingdom that deserves our foremost allegiance. There's only one king and only one kingdom that prevails, that deserves our focus, our foremost allegiance. And for us, the temptation is to side with and to go for that shiny statue. After all, it is dominating. It's imposing. It gets our attention, and we're called to give our best energy to this through the political realm and through parties, and that we're supposed to be into human dynasty building, that is to be our focus. And yet here we read that it's not, that our foremost allegiance is to be to God's ways, the future he is preparing, the kingdom that he is bringing, and a world order that will never, ever end. This new heaven and earth where righteousness will once and for all prevail. And it's interesting because Daniel doesn't stop there. He actually tells us more. He tells us more about this future, and it's fascinating. He gives us powerful insight, not only into the kingdom itself, but the king who's going to rule this kingdom. Like, who's going to rule this thing? Who's going to rule it? Daniel tells us. Once again, Daniel has a dream. Daniel is always receiving these dreams from God, and God's like, I want you to go talk to Nebuchadnezzar and then his successor as well. And Daniel's like, listen, I just want to live my life. Like, you keep giving me dreams and stuff, and I'm talking to a guy who's going to probably kill me. He doesn't want to hear this stuff, or he wants to hear it, but he only wants to hear part of it. You don't know with this guy. He just could go off. And Daniel's like, okay, Lord, I got another dream. And he did. He had another dream. And it says in Daniel 7, in my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples and nations, men of every language, worshiped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. And here we learned three important things about what God's doing in his plan for the future. The first, we learned once again about the kingdom, that there's a kingdom coming, the kingdom of God in verse 14 that will not pass away and that will never be destroyed. So that's the first thing. So it speaks of the kingdom, but it also speaks of who's invited to be part of the kingdom, who's welcomed into the kingdom. And it says all people of every nation and nationality and race and tribe and language, all people everywhere are welcome to be part of the kingdom work of God. It is not exclusive. It doesn't put people out. It invites everyone to be part of this. And then we also learn about the king who will rule this kingdom. It is the Son of Man, it says. Fascinating language. I looked, and there before me was one like a Son of Man. The Son of Man speaks to the Ancient of Days, to God himself, to the Father. And the Father gives him authority to take his throne and to be enthroned on this eternal kingdom. And when you hear that phrase, Son of Man, does it sound familiar at all? Does it bring anything to mind? It's actually a title that Jesus in the New Testament ascribed to himself. A major title Jesus used about himself over and over again. And it tells us that, in fact, he is the king that will rule this eternal kingdom. It turns out he, Jesus, is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. He is the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. And he's taking his throne and ruling a kingdom that will have no end, that he alone deserves our worship, that he alone deserves our fullest devotion. He's unlike anyone else, and his kingdom starts out really small. It starts out so small, and our temptation is to focus on this gigantic statue. It's like it gets all our attention. It gets all our affection. It seems to hold all the power. But God's kingdom starts out really small, but it gets bigger and bigger, and it rolls over that statue, and it takes over. And in the end, there's only one kingdom that prevails, and we're far better off to know the outcome, where history is heading, and where we give our best energy. Because there are kingdoms that fade, but there's a rock that's humble beginnings begin to grow and expand and fill the entirety of the earth. This is the future. This is where history is heading. There's one king ruling one enduring kingdom, and there's no one ever to be like him.